Aktiespararna välkomnar Hansa Medical och Sören Tulstrup. Hansa Medical, jag har mött bolaget ett antal gånger. Det finns många som har glatt sig något alldeles otroligt åt en fantastisk kursuppgång och fantastiska framgångar. Nu ska Sören Tulstrup berätta mer om det. Välkommen!
Tack för det, Gunnar. Thanks very much. I've decided to give this presentation tonight in English. I'm Danish, and I've learned that Danish is a bit of an acquired taste in Sweden, particularly the further north of one goes. So hopefully it's better in English tonight. But if you have any questions in Swedish, I'm of course more than happy to take them. I've been CEO or VD of Hansa Medical since March or April of this year, so only a few months back. But I'm really excited to be part of the team at Hansa Medical, as I hope to be able to convey to you over the next 20 minutes or so. Hansa Medical sits on top of a very exciting, productive, flexible and versatile technology platform that can be used within a very broad range of indications and therapeutic areas. And thanks to the efforts of the team over the past decade or so, we're actually on the verge of submitting, potentially very soon, the registration application for the very first product coming out of the drug development efforts, a product called imlifidase for kidney transplantation. So it's very exciting times right now. But before I get ahead of myself, I should show you this one, obviously. There will be some statements, some forward-looking statements in the presentation tonight, and they should be discounted because they may or may not apply in real life. Very short snapshot overview of Hansa Medical. The company was founded back in 2007. And the genesis of the company really was groundbreaking research performed by researchers at the Lund University in the town there, which gave rise to the idea that an enzyme from a bacteria, an enzyme that we today call imlifidase, but it was previously known as IDES, which actually takes down part of the immune system in our own bodies, could be used therapeutically in situations where the immune system has gone awry. Or off track, if you will. Normally, of course, the immune system has a very positive, a benign function. It helps us combat infections. But in some situations, it goes awry, it goes off track, and it starts to attack our own cells, our own organs, our own tissue. And that's obviously very, very dangerous. That's called autoimmune diseases under an umbrella, and there is quite a number of those diseases known today. The most common or most well-known is rheumatoid arthritis. But there's also another situation where we receive an organ from a donor, living or deceased, and in some situations when there is not a perfect fit, and particularly when our immune system has been primed, the immune system can attack that organ, and that's obviously also not a good situation. So that was the idea behind founding a company around this technology. And that idea essentially has been proven now in real life. We have what is called a clinical proof of concept. There is now a growing evidence that has been published in leading journals like in the New England Journal of Medicine and other journals that show that in real disease situations, imlifidase and other enzymes actually can play a very positive, very benign role. And all of this has been done not only by the Hansa Medical researchers, but really in close collaboration with some of the leading institutions in the world, like Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, the Langone Center in New York, Necker in Paris, and importantly also Uppsala University and Lund University. So this is a quick overview of the pipeline. As I said, we're very close with the leading drug development program called imlifidase for kidney transplantation in highly sensitized patients. We're very close to completing pivotal trials, and if the last of these trials come out with good results soon, we should be in a position where we can engage in dialogues with the regulatory authorities both in the US and in Europe, and hopefully get accelerated approval for this product. And the primary purpose here, or the primary endpoint in the trials, really is to enable transplantation in situations where that would not normally be possible. Then we have already started also a clinical trial in one of the autoimmune diseases I talked to a minute ago. It's a very severe disease called anti-GBM. It affects 1 in a million or maybe 2 in a million worldwide. Very, very severe. The immune system essentially, for a variety of reasons, attack the kidney. And in the majority of these patients, the kidney stops working and they have to go on dialysis. So very, very dangerous situation. And we hope that imlifidase could be a help to treat those situations and prevent kidney failure. We're also planning 2 additional trials later this year. One is in another autoimmune disease called Guillain-Barre Syndrome, or GBS, which affects the peripheral nerve system. It's less rare than anti-GBM. It affects maybe 1 in 100,000 or so, but it's also very, very severe. And most of these patients actually end up in respiratory support. And then finally, within the transplantation universe, we are also planning to start a trial in situations post a transplantation where there are acute episodes of organ rejection. So these episodes typically happen in 10 to 20% of patients, not only in highly sensitized, but a broad range of patients. They can be, to a certain extent, dealt with existing therapies, but not optimally, and we hope that imlifidase could be a better option for these patients. Then we're looking at, I wouldn't call it the next generation, but another version of imlifidase, another set of enzymes that have been manipulated so that they are less immunogenic, which means that they do not trigger the immune system as much per se. As I said, imlifidase comes from a bacteria, so you would expect the immune system to actually also attack this enzyme, and that happens, so you can only give it once or maybe twice. So it's not for chronic situations, but for acute episodes like organ transplantation or acute episodes of autoimmune diseases. And now we're looking at enlarging this universe by putting in place modified versions that are less immunogenic, and that's the NICER program here. It's still preclinical, but we hope to have the first candidate ready for clinical trials within a year or so, which are the lead candidates selected by the end of this year. We're also looking at, and I'll discuss that briefly as well, the whole cancer immunotherapy space, where it's a different mechanism of action. Very, very exciting. It's still in the preclinical phase. So a rich pipeline of products already coming out of the past 10 years' efforts. Let me now spend a few minutes on imlifidase, and particularly imlifidase for kidney transplantation. So as I said, it's an enzyme that comes from a bacteria called Streptococcus pyogenes. We produce it in another bacteria called E. coli, that's less malign. And it has the unique property that it very effectively and fast cleaves IgG, immunoglobulin G, which is the most common component in the body's own antibodies, if you will. So what happens essentially is that because it decapitates this molecule very fast, you see here, this is in real patients, the level of IgG in the serum goes down to below detectable levels within 2 hours or so from infusion, a 15-minute infusion. And then it essentially stays down at this level for up to 7 days before it starts to gradually go back. And it's in that window that you can do a transplantation in sensitized patients. And it's also during that period that one can treat the patients, the autoimmune patients that have an acute episode and prevent organ failure, for instance. This is the total universe of potential indications. As I said, this technology platform really can be used across a range of therapeutic areas and with a range of specific indications. There's the pre-transplantation segment here, with the kidney transplantations being the most common sort of organ transplantations. Here we have an ongoing trial, as you can see here from the circle, the full circle. We're planning a study here in these acute post-transplantation situations. There's this whole universe of acute and also chronic, but specifically acute autoimmune diseases. We have an ongoing trial in anti-GBM, which I talked to here. The size of the bubbles indicate the number of patients relatively. GBS, as I said, this is the peripheral nerve system autoimmune disease. We're planning to start a trial here later this year. And then there's a host of other potential autoimmune diseases where imlifidase could play a role. here there is oncology and anti-drug antibodies. In the oncology situation, the mode of action in theory is different. Really here the idea is that a lot of the new cancer therapies are antibodies, and they have to attach to certain receptors. IgG is a competitor for these receptors, and if we can take down the level of IgG, then you will have a much higher effect of these therapeutic antibodies like rituximab and so on. And we have some very exciting preclinical results from an animal model that I'll share with you in a few minutes. And finally, there is the anti-drug antibody situation. Modern antibody therapies actually trigger an immune response from time to time. And that kind of makes it impossible to treat certain patients. And here again, the theory is that imlifidase can and other enzymes can help deal with this situation and enable therapy with these antibodies, and also with modern gene therapy, which really is making tremendous progress these days. So that's the big universe of potential implications or indications, and you can see where we're already active. If we try to translate what we're doing right now with the priority indications into ballpark figure in terms of number of patients that this would be relevant for, just looking at the 7 major markets, the US, key markets in Europe and Japan, we're talking about a universe of around 36,000 patients, which is quite significant. And certainly if you then make various assumptions around the typical price range for therapies in these rare diseases, this could very well be a blockbuster drug, which means it would have a turnover of more than $1 billion. But obviously we're not focused on the profits, we're focused on how we can help these patients suffering from terrible diseases. Let me now talk specifically about imlifidase for kidney transplantation. The issue here is that a large number of the patients that are waiting for a transplantation, there's approximately 100,000 on the waiting list in the US, another 100,000 in Europe, and more in Asia and Pacific. A large number of those are what we call sensitized, which means that their immune system has been primed by a blood transfusion, by previous organ transplantation, or by pregnancy, so that the immune system is ready to attack the organ unless it's a perfect match. So these patients, and that sensitivity is expressed in what is called a PRA score, and the higher it is, the fewer organs would be a good fit with you. So if you're at, let's say, 80%, this means that 80% of available organs would not be a good fit with you and would not work in you. And here you can see what happens in terms of the waiting time. The more sensitized you are, the higher the number of years you will have to wait until there is an organ ready for you. And if you're above 80%, essentially you could very well wait forever. Most of these patients will never get a kidney that works for them. They will die while waiting for it. And having them transplanted actually is a huge benefit for the patient and also for society. So here you can see what happens in terms of the survival rate. If you're on dialysis, which is the only therapy available for these patients if they can't get a kidney that works, less than half are alive after 8 years. If you get a kidney, the majority are alive, right? More than 3 out of 4 are alive. So it's a huge benefit to get a kidney, right, to enable transplantation. Also from a cost perspective, from the society perspective, just looking at cool dollars, it's a major improvement to have patients transplanted. The total cost of a transplantation plus 5 years of immunosuppressants and so on is less than $200,000, whereas if you're on dialysis, it's close to $500,000. So it's much more expensive to be on dialysis. Not to speak of how horrible it is. I don't know if any of you have seen a dialysis clinic, but it's really horrible. If you know patients who are going through this, have to turn up, if it's in a clinic, 3-4 times a week, sit there for 3 to 4 hours at a time. The quality of life is not good. This is a major improvement, if you can actually have a kidney transplanted into those patients. So there's a huge unmet medical need in this space currently. Our efforts here to develop a real-life drug are going according to plan. We have completed a phase 1 showing that it's well tolerated in healthy individuals, and then a series of phase 2 trials in sensitized patients, the majority of whom have been transplanted. So in the later phase 2 trials, the primary endpoint is enabling transplantation in these patients, and that has been met in all of these trials, 100% efficacy, rarely seen. Now what we're waiting for is the final phase 2 trial, the so-called HIDES study, which is ongoing in both the US and in Europe, including Sweden, to report out, and we expect that to happen by the end of this month. So it's really near term. We already, in anticipation of good results, have started a so-called long-term follow-up study, which means that we will follow all the patients that have been transplanted for a 5-year period to see what the outcome is. And that's not something you need to do to register the product. That's something that's typically done when you deal with groundbreaking new innovative therapies, really to see what is the long-term outcome here. So this we'll be doing in all of the 46 patients that have been transplanted so far. I talked to this already. There is already a growing body of evidence that coming out of these trials that imlifidase works in this situation. Because some of these trials have been initiated by investigators, we have reports out in journals already on a number of these patients. There was one article in the New York Journal of Medicine showing that in these 25 patients, imlifidase, all of them were transplanted, and imlifidase worked, prevented the graft function, the kidney function, in 24 out of 25. And the one patient where it didn't work is because IgG was not involved, and so that patient shouldn't have been enrolled. But in all of the other patients where it was relevant, the kidney was still working after 6 months, which is an endpoint in the study. So very, very good results already from that trial. We also have another monocenter trial performed in Los Angeles with 17 patients. We got results from that high level just before summer. Very, very good results again. All the patients were transplanted, and at a mean post-transplantation time point of 19 months, the kidney was still working in these patients. So great results from that. And then, as I said, we're just waiting for the final results coming out of the multicenter trial called HIDES. And we expect to have those data by the end of third quarter, so within this month, essentially. Now, if these results are good, which we hope they will be, it's our intent to engage in dialogues with the FDA in the US and with the EMA in Europe to see if we can get what is called accelerated approval. Normally, you would have to, after phase 2, go through phase 3 trials, but in specific situations where there's a very, very high unmet medical need and where there are very good results in terms of efficacy and a very benign safety profile, the authorities are willing to accept an application, review it, and potentially approve it already after phase 2. And we hope that that will be the case here. If that is the case, then we could have imlifidase on the market for kidney transplantation as early as 2020. It may seem like, well, that's more than a year ahead, but in this industry, that's a near term. So there is a lot for us to do if that plays out as we hope. So that was imlifidase in kidney transplantations. Let me talk briefly about some other potential indications. I talked about anti-GBM, very rare, ultra-rare disease, extremely severe. We have an ongoing trial here. We hope to have it fully enrolled by the end of the year, so we could have data coming out by the second half of next year. AMR, we're planning to initiate this. This is the acute rejection episodes post-transplantation. We hope to have that ready by or initiated by the end of this year as well. And then the Guillain-Barre Syndrome, which is the one that affects the peripheral nerve system. As I said, we expect that to start by the end of the year. I talked about this already, the fact that imlifidase is immunogenic, so we cannot use it in chronic situations. We are trying to develop another series of enzymes that are not as immunogenic. And hopefully we'll have the lead candidate ready here by the end of the year, and then we can do what is called IND-enabling tox studies and put it into human trials later next year or maybe in 2020. Then there is the oncology space, and I talked about this, right? You give the idea is you give imlifidase or another enzyme that targets IgG, and by doing this, you reduce the competition for receptors for therapeutic cancer products like rituximab. And so here you can see this is in a mouse model. If you give IDES or imlifidase and rituximab, this is the tumor size here on this axis. You can see the tumor is actually much smaller than if you only treat with rituximab, and clearly much smaller, and even much more smaller than if you don't treat at all, right? So if this is replicated in man, then obviously there's a huge potential application in modern oncology therapies here. But I'm saying men are not mice, and there's a big step, but it's really promising so far. Okay, so before we, and this is already red, I can see, there's no sign or clock, but let me just finish by showing one final slide as an overview. As I said, the company was founded back in 2007. We're now listed in Stockholm. We have a market cap of almost $1 billion, which is quite a lot for a Scandinavian biotech company. The team raised $65 million before I joined, so we're well financed for the next couple of years, and we can complete all of the exciting studies that we have ongoing. But we don't have enough to build the full infrastructure to launch the product. But we're in good shape financially. Right now we have just shy of 50 employees, mainly in Sweden, but also some in the US. And over the next few years, we'll build that workforce, both in Sweden and abroad, so that we're ready to hopefully launch the first product within the next coming 2 years or so. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Yeah. Hur kom det sig att ni fick namnet Hansa?
That's a good question. Initially, I actually thought, Hansa Stad, and it came from that theory of being open to the world around us. But I really don't know. I think it was related to maybe some family relations, but it's way before I joined the company.
I see.
But actually, it's a misnomer today, Hansa Medical, because medical means more like medical devices. We do have one, but it's a tiny part of our business today. So we are more of a biopharmaceutical company, but we're still called Hansa Medical.
Immunsjukdomar, eller sjukdomar som hindras av immunsystemet, för jag förstår har varit en av de riktigt stora forskningsområdena under flera år nu. Varför har det blivit det?
I think it's because science has advanced, and so now there is potentially an opportunity to develop therapeutics that can deal with these types of situations. So these diseases have been known for many years, right? But previously there were very few options available, and so now, because of the scientific advances at companies like Hansa Medical and in universities and other companies, we can now potentially develop products that can deal with these very difficult situations.
Om jag vänder lite grann på det, är det möjligtvis så att man under många år har forskat på en lång rad olika områden, men själva immunsystemet och dess möjligheter har man inte tittat så mycket på. Därför var det väldigt intressant för Hansa Medical att gå in på det delvis oprövat område med stora möjligheter. Ligger någonting i vad jag säger?
Yeah, I think absolutely. If you look at the attention that has been given to this area over the past many years, it has not been the sexiest area, right? There has been other areas that researchers have looked at. But I think that is really changing. There was an opportunity for Hansa to get in, and then thanks to the efforts of Hansa, but also other companies, I think now there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of interesting projects in this space. But we're still in the lead position, at least if you look at the acute diseases in this area.
Vad du pekar på var att immunsystemet ingriper normalt för att döda till exempel bakterier som angriper oss. Men det har också negativa verkningar. Det angriper ibland kroppens egna organ och förstör eller delvis dödar de egna organen. Och vad du håller på med här, det är framförallt njurtransplantationer där det finns en avstötningsmekanism från kroppens sida. Immunsystem vill inte ha den här nya från en annan person kommande kroppen. Hur kommer det sig att ett immunsystem kan hejdas här och att man så småningom accepterar, och som du visar 6 månader efter en transplantation så fungerar det alldeles utmärkt. Hur kommer detta sig?
It's a very good question, and actually you would expect that when the IgG level goes back, which is what happens here, then you would have an issue and the organ would then be attacked. And now you still have these acute episodes, and that happens in a very broad range of patients, whether they've been treated with imlifidase or not. But essentially, the body kind of adjusts to the new situation, or the organ adjusts to the new body. It's not fully known why that is the situation. It was a big fear when we started these trials that the kidneys would fail after 6 or 8 or 3 months already, but that hasn't happened. So the first patient that was transplanted is now essentially at the 4-year time point post-transplantation, and the kidney still works very well. And her life has been, changed dramatically.
Det finns ett antal andra bolag som jobbar med att förhindra immunsystemets inverkan. Hur kommer det sig att ert system är det som är så framgångsrikt så här långt?
What do you mean by system? Sorry, I'm not sure.
Man säger så här att det finns flera andra bolag som i transplantationssammanhang arbetar med att förhindra att immunsystemet griper in. Varför är det den utveckling ni har kommit in på, den som är så här hyggligt framgångsrik? Och varför vinner inte de andra?
Well, I think the others may also work. So we're the only ones actually that are using an enzyme that works very, very fast and effectively and gets IgG all the way down. So you have other companies like Argenx, UCB, Momenta, and so on, and they are developing other types of products that also get IgG down, but not like this. It goes down gradually and it remains at an elevated level. So we still think that there is a lot of potential applications for these products, like in chronic diseases, and we all hope that they will be successful. But so far, no one has taken the same approach as us, where you get IgG all the way down within a couple of hours.
Är det här ett preparat som kommer att få särläkemedelsstatus, alltså olika fördelar? Du kan berätta lite mer vad det innebär i så fall också.
Yes, that's correct. So given the fact that this drug targets a very well-defined small patient segment, we have what is called orphan drug status. And this entitles us to additional protection, market exclusivity, 7 and 10 years in the US and Europe, and also assistance, protocol assistance, and more openness from the regulatory authorities when we try to prepare our registration application. So we already have that because there's a very well known and well-established unmet medical need in a very well-defined small patient segment.
Vad innebär det i form av snabbare behandling?
Yeah, so that's why we think it's possible to get approval already after phase 2. Otherwise, it would be extremely difficult.
Ekonomiskt har det också fördelar, vilka då?
Well, there are certain reduced fees, for applications and to do clinical trials, and there are tax benefits and so on. So overall, it's very nice to have orphan drug status. And a number of companies like Shire that have focused on this in the past have been very successful over the decades.
Njurtransplantation, det var det ni fokuserar på. Vilket är bland de övriga områdena, ni höll på med ett antal andra områden, vilket är det viktigaste området som nummer 2?
If you look at transplantation, so the biggest is kidney. The second largest is liver, but we don't think that IgG plays exactly the same role, and there are organ issues that are particular for liver. But there's heart and lung, which are less common than kidney, but very, very severe situations, of course. And you have the same issue here with sensitized patients, and so that's an additional part of the universe for us. And bone marrow as well, in oncology patients, you see these bone marrow transplantations, and again, a number of patients cannot qualify for this because they're sensitized, and here imlifidase could be a help.
Sören Tulstrup, VD i Hansa Medical. Stort, varmt tack för att du kom och lycka till.
Tack ska du ha. Tack.